this is our mic setup. Julian, how many mics do we have? Was it 34 or 35?
I think it's 35 channels, including the talkback.
35 channels, including the talkback. And it sounds excessive, but there is a reason for this, friends. We've set up our standard direct mics, so we have some options there. You'll notice there are 6 microphones on the kick drum here, which sounds excessive, but each one gives us a range of tones from super pointed to super subby and the entire spectrum in between. Would you like to talk about
the
some
idea
things?
being setting everything up, including a few on basically different positions. We swapped out a bunch of different size kick drums, so to try to get the optimal position for everything, very difficult. So put up a lot of very different mics. So on the bigger drums, certain microphones tend to sound better or they're tuned different. So this gives us the coverage that we don't have to change the mic array. We can just pull the drum out, put it in, and then a few tweaks here and there. But you have all the bases covered from a rock drum kit to more of a rootsy thing. There's a lot of options and you can very quickly change the sound of the drum.
Yeah, and it's up to the user at that point. And then further to that, we have 2 overhead mics. One gives you kind of like a more present tone, and the other one, the Coles, give you kind of like that warmer tone.
Yeah, we think of modern in the recording world as anything condenser, so like 1950 onwards, and then old school is 1940 even before. So a ribbon for kind of the vibey,
more vintage sound,
vintage sound, and a condenser for a much more modern sound.
And then we set up a classic SM58 as the mono drum overhead right here. You'll notice it's quite a popular vocal mic, but it works really well as an overhead as well. And then we have a massive array of room mics, which is really exciting because this is kind of where we're able to get different sounds out of the kit. So outside of the direct world, each one of these mics gives you a vastly different sound. So once you're in the mixer window in the actual plugin, depending on what mics you bring up or down, changes the aesthetic of the kit, shall we say. So we have, you want to talk about your favorite setup here with the sound field in the middle?
Same kind of thing as the overheads where I have the modern and retro kind of feel. That's what this middle array is. So condenser for a much more true, more modern sound. And then the Blumline ribbon microphone, which is very much like a retro vibe, but it's stereo. So it still feels cohesive. It doesn't feel small. And then we've got a few other microphones that are same idea as the kick drum, drastically different, that don't sound great on every kit, but having them as options, it's pretty easy to drastically change the sound.
Well, sounding great is also relative, so you might find it cool, even if someone else doesn't. Or depending on like what your music sounds like, right? Like you might get a better blend for the drums.
So there's kind of 2 sets of, there's the middle array here, which is very true to how it sounds. Then we have the flanks here that are really compressed just for that rock drum thing. And then we have another set of mics further back.
These guys.
That are super high up. Same deal, different levels. Kind of the further back you go, you lose a bit more of the drums and you end up with a bit more depth in the cymbals and stuff like that. They sound smackier.
Yeah, so this is kind of like our near field mic. These are a couple of options of midfields, and then we have these far ones. And then in addition to these, Julian has set up some ambient mics, mics, in the hallways and in some of these booths that also have different timbres.
Kind of like effects mics. So having all the clean stuff is great, but sometimes it's really nice to have something that's really crappy sounding and just really kind of give a lot of it and kind of blend it to taste. And same thing with the room mics. You find that you just kind of start with I start with the close mics and then pick a set of the room mics and kind of blend into taste until it feels like a little too much. Then I just kind of pull it back a bit.
Yeah, and the other cool thing about doing that is, for example, this kit, sounds one way direct, and then it can give you another genre feel. Like you could get more of a Motown feel if you bring up the kind of darker, trashier mics, or it can have more of a modern R&B feel. So you're all of a sudden, there's one kit, but you're getting, 5 to 8 different types of kits out of it, just solely based on the mix that you're using with the mics, the mix blend.
And it really changes depending on the song you're trying to fit the drum kit in. So if everything sounds very, very close and intimate and present, the room mic stuff sticks out like a bit of a sore thumb. And the close mic is what you favor. But if it's a big rock drum sound, the stuff that's really close feels a little too studio, Whereas the further up stuff gives it a bit of life and doesn't make it feel so one-dimensional in a way.
Yeah, and that's kind of why we chose to. It sounds excessive, but that's why we chose to give you 35 mics
You
because
said we didn't really stop.
yeah, you could pretty much get anything you would want out of this one pack times 4 kits times the variations on those kits, right? So they're applicable to anything really, which is pretty fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of options. You can you kind of you don't need to use all of them. You just kind of pick the ones that inspire you, and then kind of get rid of the rest.
Yeah, we wanted to leave it to the user to curate their own experience, and that's what's really fun. Like for my own personal productions, like that sonic palette and establishing a really distinct sonic palette is a huge part of my process. And so I think that was the intention going into this when we were conceiving this pack, is that was the most important thing to me, is to make it as versatile as possible. So it's not like a one trick pony. It works for everybody.